Have you ever found yourself copying logics, duplicating the logics, like for tracking the mouse movement, maybe for data fetching, or doing those show and hide toggle? How great it would be if we find a mechanism or the way to handle this duplication of logic. And that's where there are a bunch of design patterns that you can do and adopt in React. One of those is render props. That's the highlight for today, this particular design pattern, render props. Before React hooks were a thing, what it is today, this particular pattern, render props pattern, that developers used a lot to share the logic across multiple components. This is the pattern that saved lot of developers from duplicating the code. And even today, basically, understanding it makes you a better React developer. Now you'll ask, today we have another pattern called hook, custom hook pattern, through which we can solve it at a great level, this duplication problem. Then why to learn again another pattern called render props pattern? Valid question, but you never know what kind of code base you may have to work on. It could be a legacy code using a bit older patterns that somebody have written it. You probably have to migrate that to a new pattern or need to fix certain bugs in that or even build feature on top of this. It's not always easy in an organization, especially the bigger organization. It takes a lot of approvals before you kind of start migrating things towards modernization, right? You might have to start building code on the existing stuff. That time you have to understand the code is written following a certain pattern, and then only either you can enhance on top of it or can change it if that option is given to you. So what are you going to learn today? Let's check that out. First thing is we learn about what render props are and why they exist, why it helps and how it helps in terms of sharing logic. We will take a look into a few real world examples like how we do in every session. And then we'll talk about the use cases. We'll talk about some of the pitfalls and the modern alternatives. Hook is one of them. And then finally, we'll end this video as usual with the task. Talking about the prerequisites for this particular design pattern, I think it's not much. You should already be comfortable with props, components. If you have watched the previous pattern sessions like control components, compound components, I think you're all set to follow this pattern because this is the simplest, most pattern once you understand these basic concepts. Before we start talking about the pattern, let's start with the problem. Imagine we have two components, okay? Visually imagine. One is a car component, another is a bike component. Simple. One car component, another bike component. And with our mouse pointer, we want to track the position of the car component, and we also want to track the position of the bike component, like the car's position tracking, bike's position tracking. Imagine we have these two components. Now of course in the car component we'll show a car, right? And the bike component will show a bike. These two are two different things, car and bike. However, the movement of the mouse and the tracking, like where the car is whenever we are moving the mouse and where the bike is, this movement logic is something common, isn't it, between the car component and the bike component? Now, your manager would have asked you to implement the car component first with the capability of wherever you are moving your mouse, you want to track where the car is. And later point in time, there is another requirement comes for the bike, and then you kind of end up duplicating that mouse tracking logic from the car component to bike component. That kind of problem really exists, right? And creates code smell, the code smell thing that we have spoken about in the beginning of this series. So let's implement the messy way the problem, and then as usual refactor that by applying the pattern. You can use any code editor of your choice. I have created a folder called day04, and inside the folder day04 I am going to create a React project. And in the previous sessions also I have showed how to create a React project, going to follow the same approach, exactly same approach, where I have given the command call npx digit and then tapas code in React 19. That's my template repository. And I've given the project name as render-props-pattern. So it is going to create a folder with that, with all the React code bootstrap inside it. So let's press enter. It's going to take a while to create this. Now it's cloned. And if I go to my file browser, I'll expand day04 And here I'm seeing the project was created, render props pattern. Excellent. So I'm going to go inside render props pattern. Let's install the dependencies using npm yarn pnpm, whatever suitable to you is going to install all the dependencies. Now we are going to just do yarn dev to run this locally. It's running on localhost 5173. Let us just access it over here and see everything is fine. Yeah, looks like everything is cool. All right. Now we'll go back to VS Code once again. We don't need this. Let's close it. Under SRC, let's create a new folder called Messy. MESSY. Here we are going to create our messy or the problematic component. Okay. So inside this messy component, let us first create a file called car tracker.jsx, and let's create a simple component called car tracker. Okay. For the simplicity sake, inside this div, I'm just removing that text and let me put a paragraph. And this is a car tracker, right? I have to identify this component different than bike. So I'll put it like car is at. Here I have to track the car with my mouse pointer, like wherever my mouse pointer goes, I will put that X and Y value of my mouse pointer's position. That's my objective. And I'm going to render it over here. Okay. So I have to do some logic. And of course, whenever I'm moving my mouse pointer on the browser, the value changes, right? The value will change, like I am in the X position, Y position at this position. Then I move it, I am at this X position, that Y position. So as the value changes, I have to maintain a state for this component, right? So for that purpose, I will import useState, and then let's create a state using useState called position. I'm calling it as pos, means position, and an updated function called setPosition. Of course, setting the X and Y value with 0, 0. So this is an object where X position's value initialized with 0, Y position's value also initialized with 0. Now on this div, let's add a on mouse move handler so that whenever I move the mouse, I can handle what needs to be done. And here I will call a function called handle mouse move. Now I have to define handle mouse move. Let's go ahead and create this function. Function handle mouse move. It will of course take an event, and here what we can do, we can set the position value with the value of the current X and Y value of my mouse tracker or the mouse position, right? Now to update it, I have to call the set position, the updater function. Inside that, I can set it up. My X value could be E dot client X, and similarly the Y value could be E dot client Y. So I have updated the original position using the set position, taking the current client X and the client Y. Cool. Now this position state variable always have the current value of this X and Y. If I do pos.x, it is the X position value. If I do pos.y, it's the Y position value. Simple. So I can now tell this car's at, and I can put over here position.x comma position.y. Okay. So it will tell me where my car is. And for the style sake, let us add few classes over here, like let's put some border so that we know this is the car area, and then some padding, making the full width, some height of it, and some margin around it. So this is what the car tracker is. Now, can I use this car tracker? Yes, of course. Let us go to app.jsx file. Let's remove everything that we have over here. Let's add a simple div, and then let's import card tracker, and over here let us use our card tracker component. Okay, can you see this component on the UI now? Of course, yes. Let's go. So this is our card tracker, and you're seeing, like, as I'm moving my mouse, it is showing like where my mouse pointer is. Imagine this is my car, in case I change this cursor to a car, or able to drag this car across, it will show like where my mouse cursor is, and that's my car position. So I'm able to track this car, and I'll be able to track this car only within this component. The moment I go outside of this component, it is not going to happen. Why? Because a state is a private data of a component, and within the car tracker component alone, I have defined that position state, and that only I'm rendering within this car component. Fair enough. Great. It is working great. Now I have delivered this. My product manager comes in and says that, hey, Tapas, you have delivered this car tracker. Now I need a bike tracker. Now Tapas, intelligent developer, going to the editor again, going inside this messy folder. Let's create a component called bike tracker.jsx. Now Tapas is not reusing the car tracker component because the JSX part of car tracker and the bike tracker are supposed to be different. For bike tracker, we should be showing a bike, right? So let's create again a component called bike tracker. We don't need this, okay? And what Tapas did basically, practically, he copied everything, right? He copied this import because he knows that here also we need this state. And then what he did, copied the state, yeah. So copied the state, and then he copied this JSX portion of car tracker also and pasted on the bike tracker. Only change that he has made, because this is about bike, he just removed this guy and put like bike, okay? And again, he needs this handle mouse move. For that purpose, he also copied this handle mouse move from here and has put it over here. So now I have a bike tracker, and I can actually use the same bike tracker over here. I can import it and I can use this bike tracker along with the car tracker over here. No rocket science. Now, if I go to my UI, I'm able to see both car tracker and bike tracker. Whenever I'm moving my mouse within this car tracker component, I'm able to track my mouse. Whenever I'm moving inside my bike tracker component, I'm able to track my mouse. They are never overlapping because their state is managed independently in two components. And those are practically two different components. Their JSX is completely different. But one mistake we did. What is the mistake? The mistake is this logic is exactly same between bike tracker and car tracker. Do you see this? It's exactly same logic. Their JSX may be different. So this is the problem that we are talking about. We have duplicated the logic across components. Which one we could have handled in different way. So it means that the logic could have handled in such a way that there is no duplication across components. And for that purpose, we got this pattern called the render props pattern. Now, take the definition of render props pattern. I'm going to explain to you, but listen to the definition. A render prop pattern uses a prop, but the prop, the value of the prop basically expects a function. Okay, note it down. The value of the prop expects a function which return a JSX. Remember the name of this pattern is called render props. That means it is going to take control on your rendering, right? Now, if you can take control on your rendering, you have to bring certain dynamic behavior into it, right? And we know like nothing better than function can do this, right? So imagine a function that can return a JSX dynamically, and that function you can pass as a props to a component. That's exactly the render props pattern says. Our render prop is a prop that expects a function that return JSX. Why it is a beautiful pattern? Because it lets you decide what to render, while the component provides you the how part of the logic. So imagine now we'll have one component that's going to take care of the how part of the logic. Like when mouse is getting moved, tracking that X and Y position, that is one component is going to take care of it. That is the core logic of that component, the tracker component. But for car, you have to show the car icon and saying that car at position. Bike, you have to show the bike icon and bike position at. This JSX differences conditionally I can now control using something called a render prop. Now, can we refactor our messy car and bike tracker into one using this pattern? Yes, we can do that. Let's do that. All right, let's create a new folder called with pattern. I think you were saying, right, with every pattern videos, I'm also following a pattern now, right? Every video we are creating a messy folder with pattern, like following a pattern. By the way, if you like learning from me, why don't you subscribe to tapaScript so that you don't miss out any of the future content? And also, thank you very much. If you have already subscribed, your support means a lot to me. All right. So with pattern, what we are going to do, we are going to now create one single component, which called mouse tracker. Okay, now no more car tracker, bike tracker. Okay, Tapas becomes smarter. Now I'm creating something called a mouse tracker. Let's create a component mouse tracker. And what this mouse tracker is supposed to take is supposed to take a prop called render prop. Let's take that. Okay, let's name it as render for now. This is the first step towards refactoring the car tracker, bike tracker to different component into one component using render props. Excellent. Now what I told, we will do it in such a way that this particular prop should expect a function, the value of function, which return a JSX. Correct? Now, if this prop's value has to be a function that returns a JSX, that part is later. If its value has to be a function, it means whoever calling MouseTracker, whoever using MouseTracker component is the responsibility of that component to pass that function. Correct? So we will keep that aside. For now, when I'm developing this component, I just know that this render is going to be a function. Nothing more than that, nothing less than that. And this render is going to determine what will be the JSX part of this MouseTracker component. If this render value is a function that returns a JSX, that is for car, that will be rendered over here. If it is for bike, that also will be rendered over here. And then second thing I told about the render props, apart from the fact that this has to be a function that returns JSX, the core logic of the component remain in this particular component itself. So for a moment, if I go to the car tracker or bike tracker, any of this, the core part of the component was managing this position state and then handling this mouse move and updating the position of X and Y, right? That remains same. So what I'm going to do, let's just shamelessly copy this, take it over here, copying this, taking over here. So state is as it is, and also handling this guy, I am taking over here. Okay. So now my component having the code logic already built into it. I had a div over here, right? I want the similar kind of look and feel. So I'm going to copy this div along with this class and this on mouse move to my mouse tracker. See the refactoring that I'm doing. So I'll be copying it over here. And of course, I have to close this. So far, great. Of course, I am going to format this so that it looks good. So this is my component so far. All the functional pieces I have got from the car tracker to the mouse tracker. Only thing that is pending now is the rendering part. That's why render patterns come into picture. Again, in render patterns, I may be sounding like a broken record, but once it gets into your mind and brain, you will never forget. Okay. The render is a prop that expects to be a function. Okay. Which returns a JSX. Now I take this render. I come inside this to div. This is my JSX part basically. And this render is supposed to be a function. So I say render is a function. I call it. So it means if the consumer of this mouse tracker passing a function that returns a JSX, this function gets called over here and that JSX will beautifully sit over here as an expression. It will be evaluated and we'll see this JSX. But remember, this render, the function that will be passed to this mouse tracker will never be a static. Because for car, I want it to be car. I want it to be car's position, the car emoji, the text is car. For bike, it has to be a bike emoji. It has to be the text bike along with bike's position. Now, how would caller know about the position to pass through this render prop? Very easy. You have the function. Now we're coming down to basic JavaScript. No more React. You have the function and you have this position, isn't it? So if you pass this position just like this, you have this position right now. So it means whenever your mouse tracker is being used as a component somewhere else, you can pass a function as a value of this render, which would return a JSX and also have the capability to use this position to put its value inside the JSX. Can you see that? Yes. So I have this mouse tracker. I hope you understood this beautifully. Let's go to app.jsx again, where we can test out our implementation. And I'm going to import mouse tracker and I'm going to use mouse tracker over here. Now, interesting. Mouse tracker, of course, takes render as a prop. So it's going to take render. So I'll give the render as a prop. And what render as a prop is supposed to accept? It is supposed to accept a function. You can write a normal function or you can write an arrow function, something like this. This is an arrow function. And this function should return a JSX. So let's return a JSX, which is nothing but a simple paragraph. And then we'll be closing this mouse tracker. Are you with me with this syntax? Let's understand the syntax. I've used this mouse tracker component, which takes a prop called render. And as per the render prop design pattern, the value of this prop is supposed to be a function that returns a JSX. I am using a function over here inside this expression. And this is an arrow function, plain old JavaScript, that return a JSX, which is the paragraph. Now for car, if you remember, we had that car position, right? With the car emoji and all. that I can put inside this. Car is at this, but at the position, how am I going to get? If I go to MouseTracker now, I was already passing this position, isn't it? That was a purpose. That position I can pass. So it means this POS now I can actually take over here, and I can say car is at position.x, position.y. If you want to format this one in more understandable way, you have it formatted in this way, right? Mouse tracker, render is the prop that takes a function. Inside that function, I am returning a JSX and I'm returning car is at this position, this position. Now, if I want it for bike, wow, it's so easy. I'm just going to copy this guy and I'm going to paste it over here. Only thing that I'll be changing, instead of car is at, I'm going to put bike is at. That's it. If I want it for a boat, yeah, I'll be copying it again. Just change the JSX. If I want it for human, animal, anything else, same pattern I'll be following. Wonderful. So this JSX I was first actually using in two different components. Now I have only one component that takes care of the business logic part of it, and the rendering part of it I am passing it and handling as a prop. This is what is render props pattern. I hope this is clear to you, very clear to you. Okay, now you can actually do one more shortcut over here. Plain old JavaScript again. The pause is nothing but an object where you have the x and y value. So you can very well write this as x comma y, destructuring it over here, and instead of pause.x you can just do x and y. Okay, this also works, right? If I now go back to UI, wow, things works just like before. Yeah, I'm tracking. Excellent. So I hope you understood the pattern. But this is the phase one. There is another way to use the same pattern using something called the children prop. The children prop we have seen enough in the last design pattern when we spoke about the compound component. We can refactor this code further to use the children pattern to make this code a little more readable. Let's do that. Okay, so to demonstrate that, inside with pattern, let's create a new folder called using children. Okay, using hyphen children, and we'll create a new file called mousetracker with children.jsx. I'm going to copy this mouse tracker. It is going to be exactly same as this, but with a subtle difference. I'm going to copy this, Control C, whatever is there in the mouse tracker, inside mouse tracker with children. Only thing that I'm going to change here is, instead of this render, I will call it as a children props. And wherever I call render, I'm just going to call as a children props. That's the only change. And I have explained in the last design pattern like why children is a special prop. If you are passing a children prop while calling or while using this component, you don't have to pass it like how we have done render. Rather, you can now compose this entire value of this prop within the opening and the closing tag of the component itself, right? That's how you can take it as a children itself. Okay, that's what we know from the children pattern. So instead of passing as a render or any name, let us take the advantage of what React provides. Same thing. So children is a render props again, because through children you can pass the JSX, a fragment of JSX or whatever it is, right? We have learned that in the previous session. So now we are going to come to app.jsx file. Now we are going to import mouse tracker with children. And what I'll do is, for the better reusability purpose, this mouse tracker with children, as I've copied that, I'll rename it to mouse tracker with children so that we can identify, properly. And I'll be exporting also mouse tracker with children. And here also I'm importing as mouse tracker with children. Okay. Now I have to use this simple thing, mouse tracker with children. Now I don't have to pass the props the way that I did it render. Rather, I can now write the function over here, exactly the same function that I have written over here, right? Exactly this thing or this thing, whatever I want, right? I can take this or take that one and place it over here. This is much more readable, right? Instead of having again render equals to the same thing, now as I'm using the children props, I can now pass the JSX as a children of this component, right? This is a parent and this is the children. I can pass this JSX all together. Now, similarly, I can write one more for bike. So this pattern is much more readable than what we have seen over here, and is going to give you the exactly same output. So let's see that. All right, I have the same output, but now the advantages are I have only one component where my business logic is, and I'm passing whatever I want to render as a prop to this component, but with a special children prop. That's all is the render props in React, nothing outside of it. I hope you understood it. Please go back, look into this code again. The code is there in the GitHub. tapaScript GitHub. The link is there in the description of this video. I'm sure that you're going to crack it and also do the task that I've given towards the end of this session. Talking about the use cases, yeah, you already know, right? Even today, render props can be useful when you are writing a reusable component library with flexibility in mind. You want to expose the internal state to the consumer, where they can actually pass the JSX part of it, the only the part that you want to render. And most often, the use case I would say that you have a legacy code where somebody has written this particular pattern and you have to develop on top of it, or you probably have to migrate to something trendy that we're going to talk about in a while. Now, the pitfall is like this pattern is great, but this is not perfect, right? Because these functions that we pass, right, it doesn't show up as a separate component in the dev tools. So sometimes the debugging could be a challenge. Then second problem that I feel is the performance problem, because for every render of the component, it creates that new inline function. That is usually okay, but can be an added overhead, like as and when your application grows. And that is the reason we have an alternative today. The alternative is the hook. And we're going to learn about the hook patterns in the next video. The next one will be about the HOC, higher order component, and then we'll get into the hook pattern where we'll know why hook pattern came. And then you'll appreciate, okay, this particular pattern that we're learning today, it's great. It does its job, but hook is something is in the next level. Okay. Now, to know the best, you also have to know what it was, what was before the best one, so that you can appreciate like how things are coming one by one, right? Now, some of the things that I want to say, like if you are looking into a code which follows this pattern or uses this pattern, and next video we are going to learn about the higher order component pattern. It's not a good practice to mix this render props and the higher order component pattern together. We'll talk about it when you go to the next session, because it's going to be very, very confusing for you at a later point in time. And then avoid multiple nested render props. How? Because there is a component and the component is taking a JSX, right, as a prop. Now, inside that, also you can use another render prop. So, the render props can be really nested, and this is where things gets really messy. And that is how custom hook came into picture. We're going to talk about it when we talk about custom hook in the next to next session. Okay. So, these are the pitfall. If you're starting today, don't use render props, but you might have to look into a code that uses render props. Today's task, very simple. Build a toggle component like show height toggle, right? Using the render props pattern you understood. Now it should manage an internal is open state. In our case, we had the position state, you remember? Like that is open state, and let the parent, the consumer of this toggle component decide how to render open and the close UI. Okay? You know that. Think about the same way. In our case today, position was the state, and we somehow able to pass the position from the parent itself, whenever we were doing this JSX passing through the function as render props. Similarly, something you have to do for is open, where logic can be inside this toggle component, but what to do in the JSX part when the toggle component is open versus close has to be controlled from the parent or the consumer of the toggle component. I'm sure you will be able to do it. And if you happen to do that, please come to the tapaScript Discord, join the Discord. There is 15 days of React design patterns, and there is a task assignments. You can submit your task over here. I've also given you a template. That link is in the description of this video so that you can learn better, take notes, and etc. And in case of any doubts, you can always come to this general, post your doubt, and we'll kind of discuss further. You can also check other channels in this so that you learn what else is happening in tapaScript. I hope you found this helpful and you'll be practicing and you'll be completing the task. In the next video, we're going to talk about the higher order components, another beautiful design pattern, and we'll learn that. So if you're enjoying this 15 days of React design pattern course, let me know, post a comment, please share with your friends, share on social media so that more people can come to know about it. It is a bit unfortunate that after spending so much effort, the videos don't reach to many people, many developers. It will be really great if more developers come to know about it. They're able to view it, they'll be able to get benefit out of the hard work that all of us are putting here, right? Thank you very much. Stay well, keep learning.